Good morning and welcome. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Joanne Grant and I'm the CEO at United Way Regina. And it's great to have you all in this room today because it's a special day. So the more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places that you'll go. And I'm sure the teachers in the room know where that came from. But if you don't remember, that's thing 1 and 2 from Dr. Seuss. Reading is fundamental. It is the most, and I believe, it is the most important ingredient for people to actually be all that they can be. United Way Regina is really on board with the community goal of significantly improving the educational outcomes for our children in Regina. It's a different United Way. For those of you that still think of us in the federated fundraising model, we are a different United Way and we're working differently in the community. And how are we going to address some of this? Well, we're going to take 3 different approaches in our investment strategies. And the first is going to be community-led impact strategies. The second is going to be building collaborative partnerships, like we have our growing partnership with both Regina Public Schools and Regina Catholic Schools, and realigning our investments into high-impact programming. We've been given a gift today. One of the wonderful things about my job is I get to interact with the amazing people in our community, here in Regina, in our province, and indeed across the country. And it was through one of those connections that we were able to stop Ron Fairchild in mid-flight, because he was on his way to Edmonton, and have him stop in Regina and come talk to us about the amazing work that he's helping facilitate in the States around making measurable progress for our kids. Now, before I turn over the stage to Ron, because I know that's why you're all here this morning, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about him. He's the president and CEO of the Smarter Learning Group, a national education consulting firm. And in this capacity, he serves as the director of the Network Communities Support Center for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, which supports over 160 communities throughout the U.S. They have been on the leading edge of some of this work, and he's going to share his experience with us. And prior to launching that firm in 2001, Ron served as the founding CEO of the National Summer Learning Association and the executive director of its predecessor organization, the Center for Summer Learning at Johns Hopkins University, from 2002 to 2010. His earlier positions included serving as the director of education programs for the Boys and Girls Clubs of America and as an education associate with the Public Education Network. He is also a former public school teacher who holds a BA and a master's degree from Vanderbilt University. Please join me in welcoming Ron Fairchild. I'm assuming they want you to.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Joanne. Well, thank you, Joanne. It is a pleasure to be here in Regina with you. I have had a wonderful experience in your city so far. First thing I had to do was learn how to actually pronounce the name of the city, which my wife, interestingly enough, helped me out with, because in 5th grade she had to do a report on a province in Canada, and she chose Saskatchewan and learned all about Regina, so that was incredibly helpful to me. I have 2 teenage boys also who apparently have very, very broad interests in poetry, because they were regaling me with limericks that involved your city's name, which probably do not bear repeating this morning. I also got in early yesterday afternoon, had a wonderful jog around Lake Wascana, and really enjoyed, I think, what is a jewel of your city. I do enjoy getting out when I get an opportunity to travel, and enjoy running and jogging. And I did notice 2 things that kind of stuck with me. One was there was a monument to the Loyalists during the American Revolution. And probably not surprisingly, I don't see too many monuments to Loyalists when I jog in U.S. cities. So I will take that back with me. And I will also take back with me, I think this notion was very impressive to me. As a runner, the Canadian drivers, absolutely amazing in terms of yielding to pedestrians and to runners. In the US, this is not something we do very well. I would have gotten run down if I had crossed the way that I crossed here. So I was very impressed with that. And in the spirit of really learning as much as I can while I'm here, I also had an opportunity to review a lot of the materials from United Way, what they're trying to accomplish here, the transition that Joanne described in terms of the way that United Way is moving from this community bank or this aggregator of philanthropic resources to an organization that's really interested in making collective impact and really helping drive systems-level change, which I think is incredibly important and impressive. And one thing that I read about was this bit of a turn of phrase about moving from poverty to possibility. And you probably saw the poster as you came in, this notion of possibility. And my remarks this morning really pick up on that theme. And I really want to talk about the notion of grade level reading being a key in that transition from poverty to possibility. Share a little bit about our experience with the campaign for grade level reading in the United States over the last 5 years. Share a few reflections on that, perhaps address a few issues that you may be confronting here, and then hopefully open it up for some questions and have an opportunity really to interact with you so that I can learn and really take back as much as I can. So I'm going to be talking about how we have helped communities in the United States, which now number more than 232 communities in 42 states, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico, begin to make progress on this critical measure of grade level reading, of reading proficiently by the end of third grade. Really, what this campaign is all about for us is about breaking cycles of intergenerational poverty. And for as much as folks in the United States, we talk about the great engine of innovation that we have in our society and our culture, this is one area where we fall dramatically short in terms of our capacity to innovate and our capacity to solve problems. We have cycles of intergenerational poverty in our country that literally prevent generations of young people from making a successful transition to college and career and to the kind of bright future that we would want for all of our young people to have. If the key to breaking intergenerational poverty is making sure that kids graduate from high school, college, and career ready, that is a door of opportunity. And the key to getting kids to that point is focusing on grade level reading. We know in our country that only 1 in 5 low-income kids currently meet that mark. Only about 20% of low-income kids are reading proficiently by the end of third grade. And literally, we have a catastrophe in the making if we allow that to continue, because we know for those kids who don't hit that mark, they are far less likely to graduate from high school. It is one of the single best predictors we have for future educational success. So if you care about economic development, if you care about making sure more kids make a successful transition to college and career, we have to focus on these things. And as we've developed our campaign, most folks want to say, first of all to us, is what's the curriculum and instruction, what's the school reform agenda that's going to solve this problem? And what we've said consistently is that schools do need to improve. Schools do need to get better. But we've also said that this is a community challenge, not fundamentally just a school's challenge. So we have started this in a place that said we want to support quality teaching and quality instruction. And the best way that the community can do that is by solving 3 problems that stand as major impediments for kids reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade. The first is we know that far too many kids show up on the first day of school not fully ready to take advantage of what school has to offer. We know that far too many of our low-income kids miss too much school, so we're literally already paying for schools, and even our best schools, our best curriculum, our greatest teachers cannot possibly be effective if kids aren't there. So we have to make sure that more kids actually show up and aren't chronically absent. And third, which is something that United Way here is taking on in a major way, is this setback that low-income kids experience during the summer months. So literally we have this situation where kids are making gains during the school year only to give back close to a third of those gains, hard-fought gains, during the summer months. So this is sort of our notion of quality teaching, community solutions working together, and then trying to figure out how we break down silos in systems of care for kids between birth and age 8. And what we've tried to say is that, in many situations we have examples, and I go to a lot of cities and travel to a lot of cities. I can see great programs in a number of cities. In almost every city I go to, people can point me to, here's a great program that's producing good outcomes for 100 kids or for 200 kids. And I'm sure you have examples of that here. What's far rarer, both in our public systems and in our nonprofit organizations, is folks that are actually producing measurable population-level impact on a broad range of outcomes for kids, that they can actually show how those programs connect to other programs. And so there are actually seamless transitions and handoffs between and among various programs that are producing good outcomes. So we talk a lot about a relay race. And what we have more often than not are folks dropping the baton. And so the transitions between programs and between agencies have become a major focus of our work. So that's a little bit about how we've sort of organized the campaign. But probably the most important piece that we've helped, I think, galvanize interest around is this idea that you have to put a stake in the ground about a result. You really have to set a target that folks can actually galvanize around, something that people can say, we can actually make a difference and move this number by working together, and actually then hold each other accountable in a collaborative and joint way toward moving a result. And it's proven to be the case that when you can get to some clarity about what you're aiming for, and you actually have some proof points on the ground where you can point to that says, this actually works, it kind of helps people suspend disbelief and some of their cynicism that something like this could possibly work. Because I don't know about you, but we have a political system that's very partisan, and that is we have sort of this sense of kind of a very hard-fought partisan battles all the time, and a lot of bickering and a lot of dissension about issues, surprisingly even related to education. And what we've seen in this campaign is folks from both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats in the United States, coming together and being champions for this issue. And we found an issue that's very hard to argue with. Most people, regardless of their political background, will say it's a good idea for kids to be reading by the end of 3rd grade. And so we found something that really unites people. I'm going to quickly go over some of the statistics, but really these graphics, I think, provide the footnotes for what is good common sense. So we know, for example, when you look at school readiness factors, we know that low-income kids are far less ready and far less prepared than their middle and upper income peers. We also know that access to books is tremendously different in low-income households versus middle and upper income households. So I don't know about you, but this statistic for me was just sort of a smack in the forehead when you look at this. The ratio of books for middle income kids, 13 to 1. 13 books per child. In this study, which was done in Philadelphia, Susan Newman and her colleagues found one book for every 300 kids. One book for every 300 kids. And I don't know about you, but my boys have considerably more than 13 books at home, and I suspect your kids and grandchildren probably are in that same place. That's a problem we can solve. We also know that there's an ironclad link between participation in school, attendance in school, and later educational achievement. So this is the link between academic performance in reading, and it's correlated to actual kindergarten attendance. The fifth grade achievement in reading correlated to attendance. And what you see here are kids, not surprisingly, kids who are more chronically absent are achieving at lower levels. And we also have this pattern of summer learning loss that is very well established. The purple line on the top is really the line of achievement for your typical middle and upper income child, whereas the yellow line on the bottom, shows the progression of kids who are in the lower income group. And so you see this pattern of loss. What I'd like to do, rather than sort of hammer on those statistics for a long time, so I want to do a quick exercise, and this involves some audience participation. So I need 2 people to volunteer to come forward. And to participate in this activity, you have to be able to do this. Okay? Now, I'm not going to ask you if you've ever had to perform that exercise and what context you may have had to do that. But I need 2 folks who could actually come up and do this for us and meet me at the other end of the stage. Don't be shy. Okay, I've got 2 people. I've been told I have to stay on the microphone for the folks who are video. So Verna is going to be our typical middle-income student.
Okay.
And Lori, right?
Yep.
Lori is going to be our typical lower-income student. And they are going to take steps. Verna and Lori are going to take steps to illustrate the growth in the achievement gap based on income in reading over the first, let's say, 3 years of schooling. This is based on 39 empirical studies going back to 1906. So if you're looking for issues in education that have a really solid research base, this is it. Okay, so Verna is going to take 4 heel-to-toe steps forward. Go ahead, Verna. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great, wonderful. This is the gap at the beginning of kindergarten. Why is there a gap at the beginning of kindergarten between Verna and Lori? Books in the home. What else? Parents. Parents reading to and with their kids. What else? Access to early education. Okay? What studies have shown is about a year's worth of academic performance difference between kids based on income at the starting gate. So literally, some kids are on the starting line to start. Some kids aren't even in the stadium to start their race. Okay, so now we're going to look at kindergarten. In the U.S., it would be the same school district for Verna and Lori. Verna, I'd like for you to take 4 heel-to-toe steps forward, and Lori, take 3.5, if you will. Okay, so the gap just grew a little bit, right? Why did the gap grow during the school year based on what we've talked about so far? Attendance. So Lori's going to be one of those kids who missed at least 15 days out of a 180-day school year and is going to lose ground because she's chronically absent. Okay? Now let's look at what happens during the summer. Verna, take 1 half step forward. Good. Half step forward. Good. Sorry, Verna, I'm sorry. And Lori, take a full step back. That's right. You're good. You're good. Yeah, I didn't add that to the instructions that you're going to have to be able to do it backwards. That's that is a challenge, and I don't want you to fall off the stage. Okay. So what happened during the summer? Verna kept learning because she had access to all types of enrichment opportunities, which, by the way, are not equitably distributed, right? Enrichment is a resource that is not equitably distributed. And what happened to Lori? Huge setback, right? Close to 3 months, at least 2 months, closer to 3 months of reading performance setback for Lori. That is, now they're at the beginning of first grade. Let's do one more year. Okay, so Lori, you're going to take 4 heel-to-toe steps. No, 4 heel-to-toe steps forward, Lori. And Verna, do the same thing. Lori, I meant to say 3.5 for you because you were chronically absent again in first grade. I'm sorry. Okay. So now we're at the end of first grade. So let's do the summer gap. So Lori, you're going to take a full step back, and Verna takes a half step forward, right? So this is after first grade. They're starting second grade. Let's do second grade. So Lori, 3.5, Verna, 4. Okay, and then Laura, you have a setback after summer for second grade, so you have a full step back and a half step forward. What just happened to this gap? Got big, right? And it's primarily because our schools are failing and doing a terrible job, right? No, it's not. And how often is it the case that that's the message that we hear? Right? We hear that this is all a problem with our schools. It's all a problem that we can fix by just improving what happens within the 4 walls of our schools. So let's thank Lori and Verna for that great. So this message and these 3 solution areas of school readiness, school attendance, and summer learning, and the notion of standing in that gap as a community to position schools for success and to help close that gap and to make sure that kids have a fighting chance and schools have a fighting chance of improving outcomes in literacy has proven to be energizing and animating in communities across the United States. This is our map I mentioned earlier. 232 communities now across the U.S. have focused on this. We are working on an outcome of trying to produce proof points in those 232 communities, places that are actually moving the needle on these 3 problems, these 3 solution areas of readiness, attendance, and summer, and actually adding that up to making some gains in grade level reading proficiency. And our hunch, which is being borne out in many places now, is that if you can do those 3 things, not only will you actually improve the chances for kids to be successful, but also transform the kind of relationship that community organizations, nonprofits, United Ways have with their school district. Because rather than being seen as somebody who's going to lob bombs from the outside, they're actually viewed as an integral partner that's actually going to offer some help that's actually helpful, that actually makes a difference for kids. And we can point to particular communities now, we call them our pace setter communities, that are actually doing this and that are serving as proof points. We have a set of progress indicators that we've used to help guide some of this work and sort of really have helped, I think, people focus on things where you can actually make a difference and move some numbers. So we've seen communities actually improve rates of kindergarten readiness and actually reduce the number of kids who show up with undetected, undiagnosed, untreated learning issues, barriers, and delays. We've seen schools and communities working together to improve chronic absenteeism. Places where school and district-wide chronic absenteeism rates are as high as 20 or 25%. Literally, a quarter of their kids miss 15 or more days of school. And really addressing some of the health barriers and health challenges that prevent kids from attending school regularly. We've seen places that have actually improved summer learning outcomes. And they've actually done pre and post test measures over the summer. So not only are kids not experiencing that setback, but they're actually accelerating their learning over the summer months. And really beginning to move the needle on reading proficiency. We have places that have 20 or 30% of their low-income kids reading proficiently, have seen percentage point increases over the course of their 5 years of engagement in the campaign. This is going to be a little hard to see, but I'll make sure that the PowerPoint is available to anybody who would want a copy of this. We've invested a lot in these slides and in these graphics and some of the things that I'm sharing. They are open source and available to anybody who wants them or would like to use them or repurpose anything that I say here today or share today. It's wide open. Where we have seen the most progress in terms of strategies that places have used, and this is really important. Some folks sort of go straight to, well, what's the programmatic solution to these problems? What's the school attendance program that we can put in? Or what's the summer learning program that we can offer for kids? And what we've seen where places have made the most progress, most significant progress, they may start with some programs. But I think some of the places that have seen some of the most progress have said, let's come together as a community, let's do some broad community messaging about the importance of these issues, and let's make sure parents have what they need to be successful in their role, in their most critical role as their child's first teacher, most important mentor, most important advocate. Make sure that parents have what they need in that. So the broad community-wide messaging involving the faith community, involving the business community, having a message that basically says things like, we are a community that makes sure all of our kids have an opportunity to start school ready and fully prepared, and getting people on board with that concept. And we're a city that shows up. We show up to work every day. Our kids show up to school every day. Having those sort of messages can be something that really helps organize. There's a mix of practices, programs, and policies that need to be in place to support these things. There are some critical barriers that many of our communities bump up against. One of them, a lot of our federal funding for low-income kids in the United States comes under a federal grant program called Title I. And those resources tend to be allocated all during the 9-month school year. And what we've seen is some real policy change at the district level to say, does it really make sense that we spend every last penny of our resources during the 9 months of the school year, when if we spent just a little bit during the summer, we could help preserve some of those gains and not have that setback? So that's an example of a policy change that we've seen in many of our communities. On readiness, it's universal screening, assessment, and intervention, making sure that kids have vision screenings, for example, glasses. I have a hearing loss. I wear hearing aids. A lot of kids who have congenital hearing losses don't have those diagnosed or identified until much later in their education careers. So by 4th or 5th grade sometimes, kids do not have access to those kinds of opportunities, and that's something that we can solve. Kids who have a vision issue, we can get glasses for kids who need them. That's something that communities can solve. And this notion of broad sector partnership and collaboration. It cuts across attendance and summer, these same types of strategies. And what we've begun to do is sort of say, in those places that have seen some success on readiness, attendance, and summer, we've also seen a cross-cutting set of issues and opportunities, especially in places that have shown some initial success that have enabled them to go much more deeply into this challenge. So I mentioned earlier parents. Places are taking a much more intensive focus on parent success and have made a major shift in their language and their approach. And I don't know if this would apply here, but in the US we talk a lot about parent involvement or parent engagement. And as a former teacher and school person, I look back on some of my early experiences in education and kind of scratch my head and say, why do we do that? We used to set up a dynamic where it was like, we want parents to come to our school and participate in something at our school. And we would basically put out an invitation. We want you to be involved in X, Y, Z, whatever it was we wanted them to be involved in. And then we as teachers would get very disappointed when parents didn't show up and didn't get involved. And I don't know if that is a challenge here. I suspect it might be. But what we've seen communities do is shift that narrative to say, it's less about getting parents involved in our agenda and more about helping them accomplish what their agenda is and helping parents be successful in their role, and shifting the language from parent involvement and parent engagement to parent success. And we've seen that be a very valuable strategy and way that folks are working on this. We're trying to engage our health system. Our communities are starting to break down some barriers that exist between public health and public education in the United States. We're using technology in the San Francisco Bay Area. They have made an investment in technology, really an unprecedented investment in the connection between technology and summer learning, where they're reaching 50,000 kids with summer learning programs and online content and material that really would not have been able to scale were it not for technology. And then in our public housing sector, we've seen communities that have identified their lowest performing kids, and they know where those kids live. They know that they're in public housing, and that by working with their public housing authorities, they've been able to make a pretty significant difference and dent on this challenge. So I want to end with just a couple of thoughts about what we've learned. We're about halfway through the campaign. We started in 2010, and we're ending in 2020. We've had a goal of making sure that we show progress, 100% increase in reading proficiency in at least a dozen states for low-income kids. We're halfway to that goal, and we're optimistic that we're going to get there. It's going to take a lot of hard work over the next 5 years. But a few things that we've learned in the process. One, I don't know about you, but I already have a very full to-do list, right? Most of our community partners, our nonprofits, our agencies, our organizations are folks who are working not only their job, but in many cases are also working and trying to do someone else's job too, especially in recent times with the economic downturn and things that we've seen. Folks have a very big to-do list. What we've tried to do is lead with the framework to say you can hang a lot of projects, a lot of programs, a lot of efforts under this umbrella of making sure that kids are reading proficiently by the end of third grade. So we've done that. We have said and helped folks move from planning to implementation a whole lot quicker than they would have otherwise. A lot of these efforts tend to bog down. I don't know if you've been part of efforts to do planning, strategic planning as a community. Those efforts tend to get process heavy and tend to bog down really quickly. And what we've encouraged people to do is sort of take a strategy of learning while doing, get busy about the work, energize people around actually making a difference. The public-private partnerships, I can't say enough about the importance of this. We have communities across the U.S. where the mayors are turning over, where the school superintendents are turning over, a lot of churn and change in leadership. What has been important in many of these communities is that the local philanthropic community has really stepped up and said, we're going to be here for the long haul. We can provide some leadership and some glue to keep these efforts together through a lot of these transitions. The Big Ten is critical. We need to make sure that everyone has a role and a stake in this, and I think all of you can play a really important role here in Regina. We're also seeing that a lot of the innovation that needs to take place in our campaign communities is less about coming up with the new program, the best new summer program that you can come up with, or the best new attendance effort, or the best new school readiness program. A lot of the innovation needs to take place at the point of the handoff. We don't see any real hope of making a big difference on this issue at a population level until and unless more kids get more touch points across the spectrum of opportunities, and that we can kind of start to connect these things together is really important. I think what I would like to do now, is just kind of take a little bit of a break from my presentation, because I'm sort of sensing there may be some questions in the room based on some of the things that I've said, or whether this has sparked any ideas on your part. I would love to hear any questions that you might have, and then we can kind of wrap up. We have a question. Yes, sir. How is that defined? It's a very good question. So we have something in the U.S. called the National Assessment of Educational Progress, called the NAEP for short. And it is the only national measure that we have that's consistent from state to state. And so in the U.S. we have different state assessments. Every state has their own state assessment. So what's proficiency in Massachusetts is different from proficiency in Michigan or Mississippi. So that National Assessment of Educational Progress is the only one that we have consistent data on across the board. And the way they define proficiency is mastery of complex content and ideas. So the notion is not just being able to decode words and be able to sort of look at words on a page and read them, but it's actually mastery in comprehension and being able to master complex content and ideas. So that's how they define it. Right now, as I said earlier, only about 18% or so of low-income kids are hitting that mark, that proficiency mark, and our goal is basically a 100% increase, double that number in at least a dozen states. That's how it's been defined for us. Other questions?
Ron, would you elaborate on some of the strategies for school readiness? One of the things that we've done in Regina is we've developed 3 early learning or family centers throughout the city. So that's one of the strategies we've used. But I think it'd be really interesting to hear what some other strategies that
Yeah. It's a really smart approach, I think, to focus on those centers and center-based programming. We also have a challenge in many of our communities where the majority of kids are not in center-based programs, but they're in what we call family, friend, and neighbor care. So they're literally in at-home daycare or other kinds of settings and contexts. So the strategies we have to use to make sure those kids are ready, very different. So I think appealing directly to parents. We've seen a lot of programs that flow from hospitals and programs that work with nurses and pediatric nurses. We know, like, for example, in the state of Georgia, they've made a huge effort to reach pediatric nurses with messages about grade level reading, with books, where they're able to distribute books to families, because more than 93% of low-income families have interaction with pediatric nurses. Like they in the state of Georgia, that was their number one messenger, that they said, we've got to make sure nurses hear this and have resources and tools and things that they can give to parents and families. I like to say, sort of find out where parents are, especially in the early years, and figure out how you can meet them where they are. Kansas City just started this major program with barbershops. So they know barbershops and beauty salons are places where parents and families with young children go, and they have a lot of time while they're there. Laundromats, the same thing. How can you redefine the time that parents are going to spend with their kids anyway Where are the places they may go where they might have long waits, where they're going to be sitting? How can you engage kids, especially pre-kindergarten, in those kinds of activities? So I think there's a center-based approach. We need better professional development for the staff in those centers, but we also need to figure out how we get out of that. And in the U.S., we've got a lot of engagement with our public libraries as well, doing a lot of innovative programming, some that even take the library on the road, meet parents and families at sports fields and things like that. Where they're going to be, again, on the weekends where they spend a lot of time. A lot of libraries, for whatever reason, close on Sunday. Well, that's a day when a lot of parents are off and they're looking for resources and opportunities. So those are, I guess, a few ideas on that front. Yes, sir.
I built out your statistics with regard to low-income children with reading, but I have university professor friends that tell me that children coming into university today, under grade 12, out of the high school system, can't read, and they can't study. They're having a tough time. Those are not just children from low incomes. There are kids.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, and I'm glad you raised that, because the campaign has been unapologetically targeted in the U.S. on low-income kids. We've said that from the very beginning. But when you look at the statistics more broadly, this is not just a challenge for low-income kids. And I've actually seen some of the reports from the United Way here that suggest that this is a broader challenge, that you could have a message that basically says, this is about all of our kids. We've chosen not to do that. We've chosen to have a very targeted campaign around low-income kids because that's really where we want to focus. But I don't see there being any reason why you couldn't have a message about that. And it's true that there are many kids who struggle with reading proficiency. So thank you for that point. It's an excellent one. Other questions? Yes? What does a good parenting program look like? And in many cases, parents may be struggling with reading themselves. So what I'm kind of intrigued with, and I've seen lately, is an approach called a two-generation approach that basically says that for a long time we've sort of said, well, we can just take care of the kids but not really worry about the parents. But a strategy has to be in place to meet the parents where they are, to help parents, provide support for parents, but then also to work with kids. And so to tend to both of those generations, we have parents and grandparents who really struggle with reading proficiency themselves. And so how do you help them with that? I think one of the things I look for is, are parents engaged authentically as peer leaders? So a lot of folks go in and say, well, we need to sort of educate parents ourselves and tell them what to do. What has worked really well, and I've seen in many of our communities, is to say, let's build the capacity of a handful of parent leaders who can then go out and who can do some of the home visiting, who are folks in the neighborhood that people like and respect, who can actually be leaders among parents. And to sort of to take sort of a peer-to-peer approach, I think, is one thing that I would suggest would be a very useful and helpful thing. And then a lot of parents feel like they're not in a position to be able to help their kids. A lot of parents feel that way. And there's a program that we've seen work in many communities where they ship parents a box, a cardboard box, that says, inside this box is everything you need to help your child be ready for school on the first day of kindergarten. It's all in this box. And there's a sort of this big drama. The parent gets the box. They open the box, and in the bottom of the box, there's a mirror. And what that does for parents is it empowers them and gives them a sense that they can do things. Even if they're struggling readers, they can listen to their kids reading to them. They can help turn the pages. They can point to pictures. They can do a number of things that would engage with their kids. We have significant numbers of dual language learners in many of our communities who are trying to learn and be proficient in Spanish and English, and parents who are struggling with that. We've seen a lot of innovation that says, let's learn English together. Let's learn proficiency together and engage parents and kids working together on that common challenge. Because right now we have situations where kids, you'd like for them to be proficient in both their home language and the language we're hoping that they learn, but they're really proficient in neither. And so how do you help kids with those twin challenges? So those are, I guess, a few of the things that I've seen that can really work or can be effective. Other thoughts on that? Questions? One thing I guess I would sort of end with is what we're looking for in terms of criteria or things that we've seen as keys to success, because I think this might be helpful as you're sort of thinking about how you might make a difference on this issue. And really, I think, move the needle on the number of low-income kids who are reading proficiently. You have to be very clear, dogmatic, and almost truculent in some respects about improvement in outcomes. And you can't sort of soft pedal that. Results and outcomes are really what matter most, and results in terms of actually moving the needle on student outcomes, student level outcomes, on attendance, on readiness, and on summer learning. We've seen communities that have a really good plan that sometimes sits on a shelf. And I talked earlier a little bit about a planning process that bogs down. I don't know if you've ever been part of this, but I've been part of many planning processes that people just plan to plan and plan and plan. And it just gets very wearisome. Other places produce a good plan, then it sits on a shelf and they don't do anything with it. We've got communities that started back in 2011 with a plan and have continued to do refinement of that plan, have said, are these strategies working? Let's revisit the plan regularly and make some adjustments to that. That's been a major key to success. I shared earlier some of those strategies that we think are really working and are successful. A lot of folks have invested very strategically in a handful of proven and promising programs and tried to replicate those and scaled those, and we've seen that working very successfully. The issue about parent success and health, can't say enough about the importance of the parent role, and then also the health barriers, the health determinants of learning being so critical and so important in all of this. The use of data, I think where we've seen the most success have been places that have said, we're going to set a clear target. We're going to say to the community, here's our baseline. We're going to establish that baseline, publicize it, everybody's going to know about it, and then we're going to actually track progress against it. We're going to disaggregate data. So for example, when I looked at the kids here who are in the bottom 10th percentile, how important it is to move the needle and to target specific subgroups. I know there's a huge challenge around indigenous populations. We have a similar kind of challenge in the United States. We talk a lot about the opportunity quartile, the kids who are at the bottom quarter of performance, and moving the needle for those kids, really focusing on data and ensuring accountability around that. And then bringing a coalition together, including the philanthropic community, which in many cases have really provided critical leadership to this. These are some of the keys that we've seen to really making not only short-term progress on these issues, but actually setting the stage for longer-term effort to turn the curve on a measure that is absolutely critical and important. So thank you very much. I have thoroughly enjoyed our time together, and at this point, I think I should turn it over to Joanne.
So thanks, Ron, and I should let you all know that in typical United Way fashion, we're being kind to Ron because we gave him breakfast today, but we're working him like a dog for the rest of the day before we let him fly to Edmonton. And he graciously agreed. Thanks so much for framing the work that's been going on. I think for us in this room, the issues are not new to us. The approaches, maybe, but I think for me, for sure, what I heard from you resounded very well. And I do, from my work in the community and reaching out to all of you, I think we're ready for something like this. I think we're really ready for something like this. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what United Way has been doing and will continue to do. So we heard there are 3 key things that we need to be focusing on: grade level reading, summer learning loss, and chronic attendance. And guess what? That's all part of our strategic plan. So as we build things out, we're working on that. Now there's a few small things that have already happened, and they're small at this point, but we intend to grow them. So we heard also about the lack of books for kids in lower income. I'm happy to announce that we're starting with our first of hopefully many to grow classroom libraries that we're going to be putting in some of our inner city schools. I can't talk a lot about this, but we have a great opportunity because of a great partner with us in the community. You'll hear an announcement about it later on. We're going to be able to distribute 10,000 books throughout our province coming up. We're going to continue to build and work with community partners to figure out what is that school readiness strategy and where can we help. But I would like to share with you some success that's already been had in our community. And before I go into it too much, I will just talk a little bit about the 5 things that you need in place for community or collective action to actually work. And the first one is a common goal. Well, we have that. We took that a little bit farther with our 2 major school boards in our city, and we actually entered into a conversation. So our goal was, how do we stop that summer learning loss? And we aligned quite well. And I'm sure when we first went to Sean and Greg, they went, oh God, here's the United Way. They're coming back to ask me for more money. I think they were refreshed with the challenge, or the challenge that we put on the table is how do we actually fit in and how do we help you succeed? Then one of the key pieces of this partnership for us is not only do they have the expertise because the teachers know how to teach these kids, but they know how to and have the tools to test and measure. And that was a critical piece. We needed to know, are we actually moving the needle? And thanks to both school boards, we know we are. And we have to continue to stay at the table about what's the mutually reinforcing activities that we can all do that help move the needle. And we continually communicate, probably sometimes too much. And what makes this all work for us is because we're all committed to that goal and stay there. And I believe that both school boards would see that the value that the United Way brings to the table is being able to continue to connect some of these things that are going on while they continue on their journey of making sure our kids are well educated. So without going into too much more detail, I'm going to show you something that we're very proud of, which is our summer success video. And this is a little bit of magic that's been going on in our community for the last 2 summers.
Summer Success is a program that is in partnership with 2 of Regina's largest school divisions with United Way Regina, focusing on kids that are 1 or 2 grade levels below what they should be at for reading, and really rich literacy activities and a smaller student-teacher ratio, and a lot of fun.
We're looking for kids that are close to reading level, but they're not quite there. And so kids that maybe have shown some struggles in the year, with a little additional help and support, we can catch them up and get them rolling.
The nutrition aspect is huge in the Summer Success Program. Oftentimes the kids might not have even had breakfast, so when they show up they're extra hungry. You know, every day there's something coming home, so it's super important to our kids and also our families.
Yeah, we start with food and greetings, and then we move to the academic portion of it.
And we'll help them maintain the grade level reading and not slide any further and get them ready for school in the fall.
What we found with some children is that when we did the assessment later in the school year and then we would do it in the fall, you would actually see a slide in their reading levels. And so that's where the idea came forward. How do we deal with that summer slide?
This is a very common situation. Nothing to do with the students' natural academic abilities, anything like that. Just those 2 months at a time of staying where they're at or regression compared to some of their peers, and magnifying that over the course of 8-9 years in school. We really look at it at that grade 3 reading level of being a key area, but we're gonna have your kids in school for an extra 2 weeks during the course of the summer. Doesn't necessarily appeal on paper to a lot of the kids, but the activities and the learning that's provided, plus the additional parts that we've added with the help of the United Way and the funders has been outstanding.
I really believe it takes a village to raise a child.
As a community, we need to work together. But we really do believe that there's a lot of benefits for individual children, but also benefits for families.
My child would probably have been shy before, but now that she's met the new children and worked with the teachers, the instructors, she's not so shy anymore. It's really good for her to be involved with these activities. It's good for her self-esteem, her morale, and yeah, I love it.
It's very beneficial in literacy instruction when you're able to have more one-on-one or small group instruction. So often volunteers are able to come in and read and interact, and it's a very positive piece of the program.
As a volunteer with the Summer Success Program, we go out to participating schools. And even this year we had them actually downtown here. And we just mingle with the kids, we help them out with reading and literacy and any sort of crafting activities. And that's the other best part about this too. Like, a lot of people see it as us volunteering for them, but on the flip side of things, it's cool for us to learn from them too. And as a volunteer, you get to come and hang out with kids and have some fun for even an hour. It's a great opportunity.
Employers who are kind enough and thoughtful enough to free them up to come during work time and help out our kids in situations like this, the smiles on their faces rival those of the children themselves. They really feel as though they are gaining something tangible from their experience.
Oh, it's everything, they just bring so much life and energy to learning. I remember back when I was that age, I was just full of life when you're trying to learn like that. So when you're reading with them and you're interacting, you're getting to know them personally and they're getting to know you. It's an all-around great experience.
From the moment you walk in, you'll realize the value that this program has. And after stepping into the United Way and seeing the magic that they're working with the students of Regina Public and Regina Catholic Schools, I'm 100% behind this.
Funding is huge to run a program like this. United Way has just been incredibly helpful for us to make this happen. Volunteerism is an absolutely key cog in this. We've had some great opportunities of folks mobilizing from the community.
The end goal is really to stop the summer slide that has been identified in these kids at this age.
It's certainly being looked at and attempted to be addressed in communities across North America.
As a community, if we're able to pull together and provide some different unique opportunities for children and families over the summer months, it will pay huge dividends in the future.
We will definitely do Summer Success through the United Way again and again and again. It was that enjoyable.
We need our community to care about these kids and care about the results that they achieve. We need your time, we need your talent, and yes, we need some of your treasure. that is an example that I hope you all took from, that was the community coming around. And I know it was really hard for you to see all of the partners that we had involved on that screen. That's because that's how many partners engaged with us to make this happen. And it is a great example of what Ron was talking about. We can do this as a community coming together. We can have success. I just want to give you a little bit of some stats about how it changed from year 1 to year 2. We started with 3 schools in our first summer success program. This year in 2014, we doubled it to 6 schools. We expanded how many kids? So 89 participants this year from pre-K to grade 3. Last year, we were able to give out 2 books for the kids to take home. This year, each kid got to take home 10 books. They have their own home library now. And 124 volunteers came together for one-on-one reading and activities, showing these kids positive role models and that someone cares about their future. And I have to say, the whole tower tour, I think those kids that were standing up on the hill tower looking out at Regina probably were going, I didn't know that the place I lived was this big. These are the differences that we can make, each and every one of us. And I am here to challenge you today as a community in whatever role that you play. We can do this, we must do this, and Ron has given us some good tools to continue on this journey. And again, I can't say enough about the partnership with the school boards. It's taken a while for us to come together and trust each other, but we can't do this without them, and I think they strongly feel that we bring value to the table as well. I thank you all this morning for coming and listening, and as you go away, remember, reading is fundamental, and we can change a child's life.